Mobile phones and the internet have transformed how we communicate with each other, how we share our identities, and how we understand and aspire towards fame. Increasingly, we see ordinary people being catapulted into the spotlight, sometimes literally overnight. The line between audience and creator is becoming blurred, and many believe we're building entirely new types of culture. I wanted to find out how individuals stand out in the new media context. With screens all around us, especially in the West, it seems all you really need to become famous is a good idea and an internet connection. I wanted to know how these new technologies and platforms are changing the ways we brand ourselves and aspire towards recognition. What does it mean to have a personal brand? What kinds of communities are forming around these new so-called micro-celebrities? And what about the actual labor involved? It's way too easy to dismiss these new trends as unimportant, as some millennial frivolity. These are huge industries with real-world influence, and of course there are real human personalities behind every brand. But first, what exactly is mobile culture? I went to the School of Arts and Media at the University of New South Wales to speak to Media and Communications Professor Michael Richardson.
I think the natural academic answer is to say that, well, that's a term with a lot of possible interpretations, but I think that's true in this case because on the one hand, if we think about mobile cultures in the broad sweep of history, then culture has always involved certain degrees of mobility, and in the sense that people have moved from village to village, from village to town, from rural areas to urban spaces, and so culture has migrated and changed as it's moved. But it's also a term that we could apply to more media-oriented technologies, and certainly it's a term that's become quite prevalent today to talk about the way in which the way cultures form around new mobile media technologies, and also how new forms of cultural movement are changing the way we engage with one another and with in and through media technologies.
So the non-academic answer? When people say mobile cultures, they're probably talking about these evolving forms of communication and community that we see every day on our phones and on our feeds. Mobile culture is watching a world event take place as it happens. It's being a part of the conversation in real time. It's taking a selfie and posting on Facebook and having your friends react to it. But what's so special about this moment? Michael was right. Humans have been spreading culture since the beginning of time. Television and radio have been making the world smaller for decades, and celebrities have existed for just as long. Why all the hype over Facebook and Instagram?
I would say though that in addition to those notions of immediacy and the collapse of distance and so on, we have a more individualized and personalized mode of engagement with culture today. The most obvious way, of course, is if we look at our social media feeds, where we see information presented to us based on the preferences that we've given to the algorithm that sits behind Facebook or behind Twitter or Google or whatever. I think in terms of the specifics of digital branding, is that there is this emerging notion that because we're always so connected to the internet and because so much culture is mobile in the way I've been describing, that one needs to have a presence in that is public and outward facing. And I think that is a distinctly new phenomena.
It's true. Anyone who spends enough time using social media will begin to feel those pressures on how we present ourselves. From academics to artists, we all fit into and perform different identities, and mobile technologies are clearly changing the ways that we do this. I wanted to find out more about the actual people engaged in these cultures, and so I met with Samantha Tung, a young student and artist whose work in the fashion industry is also changing in the contemporary context. She doesn't yet describe herself as a micro-celebrity, but rather a content creator, interested more in inspiring people at the intersection of art and fashion.
Also, this is one of my favorite quotes ever, probably. You see it on my Instagram a lot, just because it's massive. Social media is great, actually, for building, because people kind of look at your Instagram page, for example. They look at it as more of like a resume or like a portfolio that's already there, and so all your work can be showcased there, what you are capable of, what you like to do, your personality, all comes out on social media. So that has been really good because it's given me a lot of opportunities to work with brands from all over the world, And it's like there could be a brand from, for example, the UK that wants to do a collaboration with me, and because of mobile phones, because of emails, because of everything that we do now is done online, time and space, poof, gone basically, because you can reach out to someone who's halfway across the world, and it's pretty much instantaneous. Everything that you do is instantaneous. You can get like an immediate response. Stuff can be shipped over in like a day or two. So crazy. It's honestly crazy.
It definitely does feel crazy seeing how easily people can connect and build community across all sorts of borders and divisions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the work is any easier. While the internet may have removed barriers for a lot of people, it's still hard work and talent that stands out.
You don't necessarily have to know people or have like a ton of connections, but you can just literally sit in your bedroom and churn out and like show people that, hey, I've got something special that I have to offer. Like now you see Vine stars walking for like Dolce & Gabbana fashion shows. Like that doesn't happen if it weren't for the whole concept of being a micro celebrity.
But what's a micro celebrity?
Micro-celebrity is a pretty new term, and it's a really interesting one, especially for our industry. When influencers first came on the scene, it was about people with mass reach and how can we get our brands into their hands and them to authentically talk about our brands. However, research has sort of showed that while people have really big numbers, they don't have that high engagement.
Tammy Ireland is an account manager at Deck PR, a public relations and strategic communications agency in Sydney.
So all micro-celebrity is that sort of next step down. In our view, it's sort of the 3,000 to 10,000 followers, if you like, to talk about the Instagram or YouTube or whichever platform, who might not have as much of a reach but have a much more engaged audience.
So not only were the lines blurring between users and producers, artists and audiences, but so were the lines between celebrities and so-called everyday people.
People like Tasha Oakley, Gary Peppergirl, Nadia Fairfax, Margaret Zhang, like these are all really, really influential people who have millions of followers, and I mean, they're huge, you know, and they definitely do get treated the same way that these celebrities, other major celebrities do. They may not be known to a more mainstream public, but their followers are people who engage with them, and they can be tracked more easily than a major celebrity. So then that way, you know, PRs and things like that can see the press, see the results much more easily.
It's all about that outward perception. I think it's incredibly risky for anyone who is, I guess, averse to comparison in a negative way, especially for young kids at school. It's very risky, but it's also incredibly great for the creative industry to utilise people who aren't just the usual handful of influencers or celebrities that we used to utilise. There's just so many great creative brands in Australia, and by that brands in that instance I mean personal brands, that it's awesome to see like these unique people. I also think we're getting a lot more diversity coming through in that instance through micro-influencing, just purely because of social media and personal brand.
So the world is clearly changing for PRs, publicists, artists and academics alike. We're more able than ever to connect with and build community around the things that we care about. The internet and mobile media have opened doors for all sorts of people, many of whom might never have been noticed before. The always-on and immediate nature of contemporary media technologies is presenting incredible opportunities. But I couldn't help but wonder what deeper effects this might be having on us as individuals and as a society. With so much of our identities being built and performed online, where did that leave us? As in the actual you and me sitting here right now. Was there even a difference?
I'm always surprised that you still encounter people who talk about like an offline and online self. Or like, oh no, it's not real because it's online. How we're supposed to think about that in terms of selfhood is a big question, and I wonder whether we're not increasingly needing to recognize like ourselves as fragmented and spread out across our media technologies in some ways. So while there is this like core me that's like sits here and does these things with these technologies, there's also these like sort of pieces of me that are out there being encountered in different ways by different people at different times to their own purposes and with their own meaning being attached to them, and yet I still can't quite separate myself from those spread out encounters. So I think that, you know, the ubiquity of the internet and of online online life, I suppose, or just, I suppose in the way you're putting it, just of life itself, right, separate from the online, is asking us to rethink a lot of our conceived notions of like a contained, separate self and the capacity to maintain a contained and separate self.